If you want to get through, you have to pay me first, ante up with pennies and pay for the pretty ass, and then pay as well for an apology for me, you scrub, Max replied. 4 tenors are in your opinion a pennies, you TWOU, snorted Isabel. And what, do you envy me the money wonky? No wise. The girl snorted again. Detach yourself better from all of us, subhuman, just piss off, do you think you're in charge of this school? Matthew got upset. Laura, who had already packed her belongings in the locker, was the first to leave for a safe distance, but when she approached her friend, Max snatched the backpack from Matthew's hands. Are you trying to be Corsic, you idiot, in front of us? I'm about to learn you that I'm the one who rule here. Well, show what you can do, pick up your funny bag. Max began to mock him. Well, what, need a mommy? The boy in the black sweatshirt still laughed, seeing how the other one tried to snatch the backpack from his hands. After a while, the robber threw the bag straight at him, which caused Matthew to almost fall over. From now on, all the boys will give us money for the access here, cried Max suddenly. If someone wants to say no, he will regret it severely, he finished. Meanwhile, David turned back and approached his free locker unnoticed. He opened it noiselessly with his key and put his backpack in it to keep his back free. Immediately afterwards, he picked out his black jacket from behind the door to pull his hidden money out of it. He closed the locker and then returned to the gathering youngsters. And who came here to us? Max snorted at the sight of him. David took the hood off his head and approached him so that he could see his face clearly. I hope you came to me with the cash, little Molly. Give the overdue cash right now and go lay an egg, crib a bee, Max said, not at all moved by this sight. I have money with me, but I won't give it to you. I have come here to give you something much more valuable than all these papers, the 13-year-old boy replied to him. Did you want to ingratiate me? So show me what a gift you brought from your new mommy and daddy, laughed the chav. I have come here to set you free, Max. I bring you the truth that will set you free, said the young heroist. The students who heard this froze in silence, not knowing what to think. On Max's acne-covered face, a crooked grimace appeared. What did you say, idiot? He asked. I know you will need help. You run away from your father when he's having a bad day. He blames you for your mom's death and drinks to forget about it, the young man replied to him. In Max's eyes, he could see an expression of disbelief for a moment, but it did not last long. Nonsense, who told you such rubbish, you stupid puppy? He screamed angrily. You don't have to run away from the truth. Admit that you need help instead of running away from it forever. When David said this, he pulled 10 zlotys out of his pocket and handed them to Esther so that Max would finally give a piece. I see that you still haven't gained your senses, boy, or maybe you are afraid of me and give her money to pay for you? Max laughed. I just wanted her to leave in peace, David said. So the weakling fell in love? Do you care so much about her? Since you paid for it, she must probably be your. The last word was uncensored. What did you call her? David was angry. Max smiled in response. Do you really like such bow girls? We all know very well that this pretty girl is a religious fanatic. He talks about Jesus all the time and stuff like that. Maybe it's because of her that you're talking such nonsense now, Max snorted. David clenched and gripped his fists, trying to control his nerves. He knew that when he lost control of himself, his uncouth power would make itself felt. Don't stare at me like that and give me the rest of the money quickly, the impatient persecutor growled at him. David, meanwhile, took air into his lungs and closed his eyes to calm down. Do you want me to spoil your face little more? I warned you yesterday that it will be like this every day if you don't give me money, the black-haired boy screamed, straight into his face. David stood only in silence, opening his calm eyes. Shut up better right now, Max. It's over. If you will knock someone down again, they'll kick you out of school. Everyone already knows what happened yesterday, cried out Casper. Hearing this, hooligan went berserk. Did you send army of teachers on me? He shouted. After these words, he turned his gaze back to David. You were supposed to keep your tongue behind your puppy's teeth. You will regret that you sent your parents on me. The new mommy won't help you this time. He began to scream. The tormentor's fist hit the face of the fair-haired boy. All present people gritted their teeth at this terrible sight. David grabbed his sore face and realized that this time he will have his left eye as a black eye. He shook his head a little to ease the pain, then revealed his face by looking into his eyes. Beat me as much as you want. Your weakness will give me strength, he said. Hearing this, Max only got more anger. He swung at him, but this time the boy avoided the blow. They all looked out, seeing David opening his hand and Max's fist slamming into it like on the stone. Max tried to free his hand from his grasp, but the alleged weakling's hand did not budge. David tightened his hand on his wrist and pushed him forward. Bad boy folded into one of his men and they slammed both against the school lockers. "Take that little snot immediately." Max began to yaw into his gang. 7 strong boys threw themselves together at the one boy, but David did not even intend to beat them. He snatched the backpack from Casper's hands and wrapped it around the neck of one of them in a lightning motion. The weight of the bag deprived the Chav of balance and he fell back into his companion. He touched another of them with the tips of his fingers and threw him directly against the wall. The 4th thug galloped towards him, but David jumped over his head and caught a pipe sticking out of the ceiling. He took the momentum and landed on the shoulders of another opponent, knocking him down in an instant. Everyone stared at this fight in disbelief. Only after a while some of the students managed to grasp what just happened. How did David Topolsky destroy the gang of school persecutors? Who did this boy become? When they noticed that one of the hooligans was trying to get him, his classmates decided to help him. Casper picked up his backpack from the ground and slammed it on the hooligan's head. Peter crushed another to the wall with his great body, and Isabel began to hit his face with a briefcase. Unfortunately, the wild males began to rise from the ground and one of them grabbed her by the hair. "You can't beat girls," suddenly growled some threatening, girlish voice. The robber turned and saw a figure leaning out of the shadows with reddish, disheveled hair. Julia approached and tore her skirt oddly enough. After a while, all the students found that this strange girl had more to do than everyone had thought. With a cry of triumph, she treated her opponents with karate arts, which she apparently had tucked in one finger. When she struck his chin with her foot, her tights had already ripped themselves. All the young gangsters began to flee in terror, but the other students did not allow them to do so, preventing the gang from escaping. Tom jumped out of the line to help in the fight, but the torturer caught him without a problem, so the halfling boy stepped on his foot and started kicking it in a frenzy. "Freedom!" Matthew began to scream, rushing into a few more opponents. He snatched Tom from the hands of his executioner and, to everyone's horror, made a human shield out of him. "Give them a demolition waff," he shouted. He let him go, and Tom raised the enemy's bodies to the ground. Matthew ran into the unfortunate opponent and stuck his knees into his stomach. The cleaner, who was concerned about the screams coming from below, decided to see what was happening in the hall. When she approached and saw what was happening there, she froze not so much in astonishment, but in terror. Some girl ran up to her with a smile and, as if nothing had happened, picked up a broom that fell out of her hands. After a while, Julia began to wreak havoc with her new weapon, inflicting painful blows with her martial arts. 7 hooligans, seeing that there was no escape route, and they had no chance with the whole crowd of students, decided to surrender. Max, however, rose from the ground and was the only one to look at the 3 classes with his angry gaze. After a while, he rushed towards David, but unexpectedly something prevented him from doing so. Esther took the momentum and kicked him with all her might straight to the place below the waist, between the legs. The boy in an instant became powerless and with a moan fell to the floor. He began to squirm on it, grabbing his crutch. The students began to scream with joy at this sight, and the noise became so loud that it attracted more and more onlookers. People started pushing each other to see what was going on. Teachers were speechless at the sight of a battered band of school polluters, and other classes began to laugh and take photos of their hated colleagues. Isabel was the only one who did not notice the gathered crowd, because she lost her glasses during the fight. When she finally found them and put them on her nose, she found out that it was broken. "You broke my glasses," she screamed furiously, beating one of the bullies with a demolished briefcase on the head. Now the cameras have also gone into motion. The blonde girl calmed down only when the flashlights bounced off her glasses. She looked at the teachers and hid her hands behind her, pretending that nothing like this had happened. Meanwhile, David began to approach Max lying on the ground. The leader of the gang supported himself with his hands to escape from justice, but he did not have the strength to get up. "Beat him into his snout," Tom began to yell at David. After a while, there was a complete racket. All the students began to shout the same thing, and the teachers were completely numb, standing in silence, listening to the screams of the boys as well as the girls. Even Julia herself began to shout obscene words in the English language. addressed of course to the persecutors of this school. David, who had just knelt over Max, held his clenched fist over his head. Screams bouncing off the walls of the underground hall gave him a headache. You have come to know cooperation and unity, so make Max a part of that unity as well, Malchid's voice recalled. No. The boy shouted suddenly, bouncing his fist on the floor. Everyone twitched when they heard the scream and the great, incomprehensible impact under their feet echoing throughout the room. Chapter 57. On Saturday, David was at home. His tutors went out to a nearby bookshop because the boy asked them to borrow or buy various books for him. They were surprised to hear from him what titles he wanted. Both of them heard from teachers that the boy is a bad learner and does not like to listen to commands, even in simple physical education lessons. Meanwhile, everyone was impressed by the change of the boy, who behaved as if he were not a child from the 21st century. Once the biggest geek of computer games, he is now turned into a bookworm and a great inventor. The young man became infected with history, or more precisely old-fashioned things. He made his own bow and arrows and proved to be a master in its use. A replica of the polished saber hung on his wall, above the bed, sharpened and polished by him, as if he wanted to really create a real weapon out of it. While he was cooking breakfast for himself, someone rang his doorbell, so he stopped working and looked through the peephole to see who was behind the door. He stated that he saw the face of the black-haired man with tinged sunglasses on his nose. He was holding a large package in his muscular hands, so the boy stated that it was apparently another delivery ordered by him or his parents. He opened the door to the courier, and when he did it, to his surprise, he found that there were 3 more guests behind the man's back. David looked at them carefully. All of them were tall, probably 2 meters or a little below. They were all well built, and each of them contained something suspiciously mysterious. Lord Hendron would not be pleased. Once again, you forgot to take your weapon with you, David. Preparation is essential, said the first man unexpectedly, with a package in his hands. The boy, hearing this familiar voice, only opened his mouth. Malchi opened the cardboard box and put it in front of the door. Inside there was only a warrior's sword, which he had already given to a small friend. David, however, paid not the slightest attention to his bane weapon, and he stared at the warrior, not knowing how he had not recognized him before. The giant was not so huge and had a slightly different hairstyle, but when he took off his dark glasses in gold frames, his diamond eyes were immediately recognizable. The giant was now dressed in a fashionable black coat and had leather gloves on his hands, making him look a bit like a handsome thug or even a mafia leader. Of course, it was completely different, but people modeling themselves on appearance could actually think something bad about this man. The other 3 also did not look like ordinary men. The first with green eyes had long, light copper-colored hair and also a coat, but brown not black. The other guy with chestnut hair and honey-colored eyes was wearing a red vest and black gaiters, which made him look the most cool cat. Only he third one wore the suit, blue, with a golden tie. His curly hair was also pale golden, and his eyes delighted with heavenly blue. No one but only Malchidial at least wore glasses or other face coverings, so they no longer aroused such mystery like him anyway. Do you remember us, David? Asked unexpectedly the one dressed in a suit. David wrinkled his forehead in response. Well, you may not remember us. We helped you get back on the top when you lost consciousness after you had won against Miranthiel, or more precisely Mirentagon. He reminded him. David immediately remembered everything. He remembered how 3 celestial beings lifted him from the rubble and took him towards the clear sky. The boy then fell asleep and woke up back among his comrades, in the boat. I'm Gabriel, Archangel, messenger of the Creator, leader of Malchidial. He finally introduced himself to the boy. I am Michael, defender of the gates of heaven and the earth, leader of the cherubims, introduced himself a man in the red clothes. I am Raphael, Seraphine, healer and guardian of the stars, taking the place of the fallen son of the morning, said the last of the 3 archangels. A moment later he pulled out some white cloth from behind his coat. It's for you, boy. Let the light of this rib protect you during your coming mission, Raphael said. David stood only in silence, staring at the visitors from behind the worlds and their gifts. When Malchidial stated that he had no intention of saying a word, he took out a golden jewel from under his grey scarf. Only then the boy reacted. What are you doing? Why are you giving me this? He asked. I promised Lamech that I will keep my word. I must give you this star so that you can keep it safe, the giant replied. That's why? After all, it will be safe with you. I thought it was over and it belonged to you, said the boy. "I know, David. However, I must fulfill my friend's wish, and it is you who must take this star back to the night and sky so that evil does not have access to it and everyone can go where you were," Malchi replied. "But how? After all, you can take it there. You are angels." The boy was surprised. "I have told you before, David, that a new task will be awaiting for you. You cannot get to the sky, but only man can fulfill this task. So send this star upwards to end this story and let others experience the same thing as you." Saying this, the warrior closed the jewel in the hand of his companion. "We will help you, my friend. Now, however, we have a lot of things to do. It's time for us." When he said this, all four of them said goodbye to the human. Neighbors Dislav was just going downstairs to go out into the park. When he saw who the boy was hanging out with, he shook his head in disbelief. Four mysterious guests greeted the older man politely, and somehow made their voice soothe his nerves. He smiled at them, feeling a strange peace inside, and his suspicions have been blurred in his head without a trace. The visitors began to descend right behind him, and as they left the building, David noticed through the window of the staircase that they were getting into a courier van. Only Malchut had his own black motorcycle, which he drove off first. The white vehicle drove away right behind him and disappeared behind the corner. David opened his hand and looked at the star. He took the box inside and closed the door behind him. A great assembly was taking place at the top of the mountain of assemblies. The Creator sat on his golden roller throne on the wheels that allowed him to turn around the circle of his kingdom, and he waited patiently for the coming of all his servants. With one glance he could tell who was missing and who was not. Next to his throne stood also many great angels: Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, Ariel, Jeremiel, Haniel, Zadkiel, Raziel, Azrael, Jophiel, Chamuel, Riguel and Sandalphon also knew perfectly well who was not among the assembly. They knew that the joy and conversations were about to end, for another angel was to arrive, who often came unannounced, but the Creator knew when he would come, so they too were not particularly surprised when this terrible sight appeared before their eyes. Laughter and conversations died down and everyone parted in silence when a mysterious, shining object appeared in the sky, coming from the earth below. The round object began to approach, dazzling in the eyes with more and more brilliance. After a while, the vehicle landed on the mountain, in front of the throne, and the door opened, or rather blurred. From the center of the huge sphere emerged a figure emanating pristine light, surrounded by all kinds of colors that could only be imagined. In particular, these were the colors of aurora around his head. Countless jewels hung on the great angel's chest, and wings made of pure fire lit up his purple and scarlet robes. Despite this beautiful sight, all the angels had their heads down. This wonderful, majestic figure was nobody but the fallen Son of Light himself. From inside came more fallen angels, serving their Lord, who was approaching the throne. He stopped halfway and mumbled quietly towards the Creator. "I see that this time you did not send me an invitation." God, of course, heard the words addressed to him perfectly. "You rejoice for another man," Lucifer guessed. "I understand that you are celebrating his temporary victory. You know very well that it will not help with anything." He began to speak further. "I have not asked you to speak, son of darkness." The Creator was angry. Metatron, hearing his divine voice, flinched in fear, but he quickly calmed down, pretending that nothing like that had happened. "Where have you been since our last meeting? Did you pay attention to anything in particular?" asked the Creator a little more calmly. I looked around the world and flew along in wire to find those who were looking for me. I came here because I heard that another man had entered my world who had found the truth," Lucifer replied. "We are celebrating his victory," replied the Creator. Even though his face was covered with light, he let them see his smile, but Lucifer had no intention to be happy. "You are well aware that the unknown world belongs to me. I am the Lord of human minds, for they themselves have chosen the fruit of knowledge. I have always been to them, for I am the son of the morning star. I am in control of the stars and I am their guardian." The fallen angel began to scream. "You are their guardian." It was corrected by the Creator. "Now you come only to steal and destroy," he finished with sadness. Hearing this, Satan widened out his eyes, which suddenly turned into black balls. The angels who saw this quickly lowered their eyes again. Only the archangels could withstand his terrible gaze. "You're a monster," Lucifer mumbled to the Creator. "I hate you with all my heart and will make sure that every person will know who you really are. You were human. I gave you a chance, but you rejected it and preferred to die for these sinners. You love them so much that you couldn't even bow down to me." The angel paused abruptly, because the Creator arose in his wrath, and the heavens trembled with the thunder of lightning. Lucifer again began to tremble all over his body, but he still did not intend to remain silent, for his mouth still wanted only to defile the name of the Creator. "For what did you create them? After all, you knew that they would proclaim me God. Instead of destroying me right away, you watched them suffer. Power here is actually more important to you than love for the world. I had the power to give you every kingdom of the world for one single obeisance. Then you would reign over the earth again and you would not have to suffer. Even me you created just to make me suffer. Your love consists only in screaming and pain. Is that how you created all of the worlds? Do you think suffering serves love?" Satan began to shout. The Creator looked at an angel whom he could destroy with a single word, or even with a blow. "You have fallen so low, son of dawn. How you have fallen from the sky, star shining. You have been precipitated to the earth, conqueror of so many nations, and you also said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens, above the stars of God. I will put up my throne, I will seat on the mountain of assemblies, I will ascend to the tops of the clouds, like the highest. But you have been cast down from heaven into the land of the dead, to the very bottom of the abyss. Those who see you will whisper on you, is this not the one who shook the earth and destroyed the kingdoms? Which world was turning into a desert? Who was destroying his cities and not allowing the captives to return home?" When the Creator interrupted his speech, Satan looked at his subjects. Immediately afterwards he turned back and said, "All the same, people still love me. My love is much simpler and comfortable for them than yours. To everyone who serves me I give everything he wants, and you only provide your servants with suffering." Saying this, he pointed to one of his people. "My faithful servant Meranthiel is a good example of this. I have given him so much power that he himself is able to rule over the nations. Your servants sacrifice themselves for you, and you only watch me destroy them." He finished. Meranthiel looked around at the crowd and looked with a disgusting smile at Malchidiel, Herachiel, and Mitzrael. Three friends could clearly see who was standing next to the masked demon. Rahiel, their former companion, looked directly at them and didn't even remember them. "Davy managed to defeat my servant, but he only killed the body. Meranthiel's servants will restore the body to their lord so that he can complete his work. Meranthiel will sit on the throne, at the gate of the three worlds, and help me destroy all human minds. I am the Lord of the Stars. I am a star. I will establish a new order, and I don't care if you will destroy me. I will destroy humanity before you destroy me. Humans are about to turn into my creatures. Their science will create a new body for me, and they will proclaim me the God of the world. They will worship me, for I will repair the world they have destroyed, and whoever who will consider me as a deceiver, I will kill him. Your dear Davy will return to me first, because I am in control of his mind." Metatron shouted, "You are no longer in control of his mind, Satan. He chose a new way. He chose truth and freedom. The second time you will not deceive him, son of lies." The Creator replied to him, "No, he belongs to me. His world belongs to me." The devil protested, and again he began to boil all over the body in anger and fear at the same time, feeling the blatant power of the Creator. "So come back to earth and see for yourself. You can come to him and try to steer him from the path of light, but he has already known who you are and will not return to you," cried God. Hearing this, Satan began to tear his garments. Even though he knew that the Creator was omniscient, he wanted to think differently. He could not come to terms with the loss of such an important man as David, on whom fate depended, his great plans. For if David does not return to the way of darkness, the blood of the originals will not be able to form a new race of man. Genetically modifying humanity was the only right way to deprive them of their free will and deprive them of their humanity. It remains to be seen who will win. You know it's inevitable. You can only delay my intentions, but the end is inevitable. Sooner or later, your patience to people will run out. Lucifer began to speak insane. He stepped back into the ball of light, followed by his subjects. "I will destroy this puppy, and your joy will again turn into tears and lamentations." When he finished his speech, the door of the vehicle again appeared in its place and closed behind him. The mysterious object rose slightly upwards, then flew towards the earth, quickly like a comet. The sphere disappeared from their sight, far behind the stars, and the light blurred in the waters of heaven and after this in the great space. Norway, Jotunheimen National Park, year 2020. A winding mountain road led directly to a deep tunnel. Snow fell from above and the motorcyclist dressed in white merged with the surroundings. When he finally drove inside, it immediately became more warmer. The winter weather was horrible, and the snow covered a large part of the roads, so that no one but the mysterious driver drove here. The man drove another few dozen miles and found himself in a complete wilderness. The road was completely covered with snow, and there were no signs of civilization around. "It must be somewhere here," said the extremely young voice of a hooded seeker. He jumped off the white motorcycle and squinted his eyes, taking off his darkened glasses. He looked around and saw through the sky the barely visible outline of the electric towers. He knew, however, that they were not really them. He climbed to the top of the hill, and a wall of razor wire appeared before his eyes. On the plaque it wrote in English and Norwegian, "No admission." "Is this where you hid?" the young man asked himself, approaching the closed gate. Through the grid, it was noticeable that the mysterious object looked completely abandoned. No wonder, because the buildings inside resembled German bunkers from the times of Second World War. Only the pillars and the dome in the middle looked much younger. The lack of cameras and the lack of electricity was to convince people that this place is just an old object that cannot be entered. The 16-year-old boy, however, broke this law and climbed his rope against the wall. He jumped from a height of 5 meters onto the soft fluff, then looked around. All he could hear was the sound of the wind. He began to walk towards the white dome, and when he reached it, he covered himself with his white, invisible to others robe, which the mysterious stranger had once given him. An uninvited visitor walked around the circle, massive building around, and finally found the entrance. He opened a creaking, thin door of metal and stepped inside. When he found himself in the middle of the huge dome, he looked at its coping. High on the ceiling he could see something, but there were no lights. He couldn't see anything in the darkness, and so, after a while, some red flashing light appeared anyway, illuminating his face. Apparently, it was nothing more than a scanner, because after a while the light turned green, and a loud beep was reflected from the walls. The visitor was not too surprised when the floor under him began to descend, like an elevator. He waited only in readiness, grabbing his sword, and when he finally found himself underground, a powerful gate appeared before his eyes, resembling the entrance of the fallout shelter. The titanium gates opened in front of him, revealing a long corridor leading even deeper down. Without a moment of hesitation, the newcomer stepped in and began to move towards many smaller doors. When he approached them, they too opened to him. "Oh, David, we honestly did not expect that you would decide to come here yourself," said a voice coming from the darkness. "Who are you?" David asked. The lights turned on unexpectedly all over the underground, and the boy saw in front of him a figure dressed in a laboratory white coat. The man's gloves were also white, stained with a strange shade of red. David guessed that it must be blood, but he did not let it be known what he thought about this fact. He began to look around the large, empty hall. Opposite there was a huge monitor displaying a map of the world, but the boy unfortunately did not know what exactly it represented. "My name is Professor Rudolf Schmidt." Meanwhile, a mysterious individual introduced himself. David looked at his face. "Why aren't you in school, David? Do you have winter holidays or are you truant again?" the man asked. David gave him an unpleasant look. "Follow me, boy. You're probably tired of traveling," said the man, unmoved. They turned left, and the doctor opened the door leading to another corridor. No one was visible. Silence and emptiness were literally everywhere. When they found themselves in a round, equally large room, the man stopped. "Sit down and rest," he proposed to the guest. The boy immediately sat down in a comfortable chair. He began to look around the walls for something concrete. When Rudolf took his place in the second seat, he said, "What brings you here, David Topolsky? Have you already received our offer?" The young man again sent him a hostile look. "You know exactly why I came here," he mumbled. "That's right. However, you know that I can change your intentions. Can you speak English?" They uploaded extremely unclear Polish language to your chip. Boy changed the subject. "Oh. So you know who I am, right?" The doctor was happy. "You are a Walla subject used to carry out orders from the New Order Corporation," the 16-year-old youngster replied. "Well, David, someone must lead humanity towards a new enlightenment. Only the Father of Light can lead us to immortality." Hearing this, the boy looked surreptitiously at the Eye of Providence on the wall. There was written, "Novus Ordo Seclorum." On the table there was also a Masonic symbol with the letter G in the middle. Giants, Jotuns, it was them, descendants of the Nephilims. You may rule this world, but you will never be able to become gods. Will you unite humanity and create a world civilization in the hope that you will reach the gates of heaven? He snorted. Yes, David. Humanity is about to conquer the universe, and the Son of Dawn will come to rule over us. We will open the heavens and let the splendor of his illumination into this earth. The man began to rejoice. There is only one you devilish god subject. He will flood your kingdom with fire and take his people safely to his kingdom. I thought you wanted to save the world. How cruel your god is if he wants to consume it all in the fire, mocked the other one. My kingdom does not come from this world. My job is to save humanity, not the world that has become the property of darkness. Why, David? After all, you don't want to suffer again? You could gain power over the world and save whomever you wanted, but instead, you want them to die. Just because I have the blood of the originals does not mean that I belong to you. I am human, and you are the enslaved monster who sold out himself to the devil. The flesh does not matter to me, for the body dies easily. That's why the same thing will happen to you, shouted the boy. So, if you don't want to receive glory, let me take advantage of it. I can take away from you the strength I once gave you. The genome I gave you is still in your miserable body. I sincerely regret that I made this mistake, hissed black-haired man. You did choose the right person. I thank God for opening my eyes and turning this curse against you. David roared. Are you sure? The doctor snorted. As he said this, the ceiling opened unexpectedly over the boy's head. From the hole came out as if two metal wires, which wrapped itself instantly with a hooked ends around his hands. David began to struggle, unable to free himself from its painful embrace. Two cables, resembling two withing hoses, began to electrocute his hands. I'm really sorry, Davy. All your efforts were in vain. My efforts as well. We tried to keep you from the truth, but you found it. Our attempt failed. That's why I have to give the genome to someone else, someone more trusted. Why did you choose me then? Shouted the boy in response. Because we wanted to destroy your resistance. Lastly, today there are only a few of you left, but you are the only one who knows the truth. With her, Anastasia Ariana Muller, like you, decided to oppose us. Even though we had created her a better grade of human, she still preferred to help a Jewish side rather than the German Reich. She was the miracle people expected, but she chose cursed love over power. The world. The sons of Shem were the only grandsons of Noah who retained faith in your accursed God after the flood. Thanks to Anastasia, all the other Shemites would have been wiped out, but she herself rebelled against the kingdom of the world and delayed the coming of the true Messiah. Metatron has to wait again, and thanks to you I cannot finally see his light. Ingrid is also a perfect example of this. She believed that the Yggdrasil tree had been cut down by comers from behind the worlds and wandered around those lands to find it. At least it was thanks to her that we obtained the genome, belonging to her ancestor, Magog. In the remains of her sword we have found his DNA, and now we must protect this cave because of her, so that none of the people can get inside this tree. I cannot allow even one person to receive this star from heaven. The son of morning is the lord of the night sky. Your God has no right to take away his property. When he had finally finished yelling, he tore the golden jewel from under David's mantle. It won't stop us anyway, the boy shouted in a frenzy. Oh really? Nothing will stop our cult of light. We are everywhere. The whole world is our kingdom. Soon humanity will unite under a common religion and all will receive splendor from the son of the dawn. Humans will shine like the stars again, and anyone who will consider him a false messiah will be beheaded. It is time to stop the resistance of the descendants of Japheth and restore our savior to power over heavens. Saying this, the man picked up a large syringe from the table. The young man who saw this was completely furious. His mysterious blood began to inflame his body to red. The veins began to come out, being visible on his skin, and the hair on the skin straightened like strings. An indescribable scream suddenly came out of his mouth. I'm not your monster anymore. I serve the light. After these words he began to break his bonds. The cables sucked into his hands began to electrocute him with redoubled force, but something caused that he only received more energy. I'm still human. He gives me strength. He cried further. Hearing and seeing it, the fanatic threw away the syringe as soon as possible and pressed the alarm. It wasn't long before armed guards and steel machines entered the great hall. Humans and robots opened fire on him, but the boy freed his hands from the cables, and the bullets filled with gunpowder exploded halfway. The rifles and cannons again sent bullets at the young warrior, but he covered himself with his invisible robe and all the bullets fell to the ground. The soldiers, dressed in black and gold armor and masks, were horrified at this sight, but they were not going to give up. The boy hid under the table, so they decided to get rid of him. Before he could escape them, the alleged doctor began to flee to the lower floors, and the soldiers sent missiles outshotted from grenade launchers towards the visitor. They no longer cared that they were destroying the whole room in the process. Now they only cared that intruder cannot be allowed to the gate. David, however, had to first take away his star, which was stolen from him by a fugitive. So he began to rush towards the stairs, and the floor behind him almost collapsed by a sudden explosion. Shell cases fell on the floor like a river, and bullets drove into the walls and barriers surrounding the terrace. However, the boy himself was not scratched and he jumped down the stairs in pursuit of the thief. He unfolded his folding bow, then began to shoot down the staircase where the man was running. Unfortunately, the fugitive hid under the steps of the stairs and moved to the elevator. When the boy ran to the next mezzanine floor, the door was already closing behind the fanatic. The young man sent an arrow towards them, but the arrow did not manage to fly inside. This, however, did not stop him from continuing to race. He looked at the panel displaying the floors that the elevator was climbing. He guessed that he wanted to get to the bottom, so he looked behind the barriers of the stairs. He saw that there were still plenty of floors, so he decided to outgo the elevator as soon as possible. He jumped off the railing and grasped the second one below, starting to jump from wall to go down quickly. Unfortunately, the guards standing up began shooting at the gap between the stairs to kill the jumping burglar. David began to descend faster, but one of the bullets suddenly crashed into his arm. His hands slipped off the pipe and he began to fall to the bottom. At the last second, he managed to cushion the fall by bending his knees under him. When he fell to the ground, another bullet hit his left leg. The boy screamed in pain, then crawled to a safe place. When he clung to the wall, the elevator door opened and his opponent emerged from inside. The man began to look around nervously, wanting to see if they were safe. When he found that he could not see anyone, he stepped out of the elevator, but unexpectedly, an arrow was stuck in his chest. The injured fugitive fell back inside, clinging to the elevator wall. David rose from the ground and began to approach him slowly. The fanatic who saw this wanted to press the button back to escape to the top, but he fell completely out of strength and slumped to the floor. The young man stepped in with a lame step inside the cabin and took out his huge sword from behind his back. "So you're going to kill me?" "Yes, I thought people like you are guided by this cursed love, not hate." The man snorted with contempt. "You're not even human. Of your own free will, you have become a mere object for the service of your organization. By killing you, I will not feel even the slightest remorse, because you have become nothing but a bloodthirsty monster." After these words, the boy tore his pendant from the neck of a man blinded by evil. Tears appeared in his eyes. He did not understand how a person could bring himself to such a state. In the eyes of the fanatic, he did not see a shred of human emotions. It was simply like an auto-carrying machine, controlled by the forces of darkness. He swung his sword and then beheaded the man, ensuring his speedy death. The blood stained everything in the elevator like a fountain. After a while, he stepped out of the elevator and pulled out a note from his back. As he walked through the tunnel next to it, another great gate appeared before his eyes. He looked at the code and typed it, but the gate didn't open. The camera located on the top probably allowed to sense the face of the burglar and someone blocked the door. The boy, however, pushed on the powerful gate and did not intend to give up. Some power penetrated all his muscles until a bullet stuck in his leg came out of his body. He stuck his fingers in the crack and, with a cry of hope, managed to open the gate. When he did so, only thick darkness appeared to his eyes. He took out a shining star in front of him to light up the entrance to the great cave. It became so bright that the light reflecting from the walls seeping with water was shocking to the eyes. He crossed the threshold of the gate, and the door closed behind him. He began to walk ahead, deep into the tunnel, and drops of water dripped onto his head, dripping from the stalactites growing from the ceiling of the cave. After about 10 minutes of walking in the cold corridors, the boy finally found himself at his destination. He looked around the inside of the great pit and kept his gaze up. "You know I'm not going to let you do that," said a voice behind his back unexpectedly. David was not too surprised by these mysterious words. Without even looking back, he replied to the figure hiding in the darkness. "You can't stop me. You don't have the power to do that. That's right. I have no power to kill you, but you have no power to kill me either. However, I have the power to turn you away from this mistake. Give me the star and I will keep it safe in my kingdom, replied the voice. Your kingdom? David laughed. Your kingdom is the abyss. I know perfectly well that you are afraid, because when I put this star back, you will never get it back. He finished. You have no right. I am the owner of this star. I was her guardian, and you are just a little carrion hound. An invisible being hissed. I'm not afraid of you. You are afraid of me because you know who is on my side. There's nothing you can do anymore. You only made me know the truth. I'm strong because I was weak. I'm powerful because I've fallen, said the boy. Wish you could see me now. If only you saw me, you would change your mind right away. I am the Father of Light. I give glory and power, cried the ghost. I see you. It's just a shame that you don't see who I am, David replied, turning behind him. In front of him was the most wonderful and at the same time the most horrible sight that could only be imagined. The apparition, covered with divine light and all the color of the world, had a face filled with all evil. His face represented only hatred, pride, anger and mockery. Lucifer, seeing that man sees him inexplicably and is not afraid of him, he take fright. He get a few steps back, seeing the imperial light in the young man's eyes. After a while, he saw the boy breaking the chain from the golden crystal and raising the star upwards. He let it out of his hands, and the light broke through the vault, reaching the surface. TWOU. Satan began to despair, unable to catch up a speeding star. In a few seconds he penetrated the rocks and found himself on the top. The fallen angel wanted to regain his former light, but the star rushed faster and faster towards the night sky. In the end, he had no chance. The crystal began to make noises similar to angelic music and it blurred without a trace and reappeared in the starry sky. It was again safe in the Gate of Three Worlds. Epilogue. Unknown World, year 5989. The walls of the Black Castle were erected on a huge, rocky island. Surfy waves soared upwards as they struck its mighty cliffs, and the night sky covered the sea with its darkness. The light burned only at the top of the mighty tower in the middle of the terrible fortress. The golden-haired Paguyerian, with 2 scars on his cheek and 1 on his neck, approached the steel statue, covering it with his purple robe. Soon I will restore your life, my lord. Your flesh awaits for you, and the blood of the chosen one will allow me to revive you. Saying this, he bowed before the statue, worshipping it. Your spirit is devouring me. Your splendor guides me. You are the salvation of this world. I want to pin my hopes in you. A black knight rose from the ground, in the middle of a drawn pentagram surrounded by candles, and looked back. You don't have to hide in the shadows. My lord illuminates my mind. He cried out towards the darkness. Where is David? Asked the girl's voice in response. You'll never get him. Your friend will bitterly pay me for killing Caliphie. A close friend of mine is dead, but Mirendagon still has the power to rise. By killing David, I will revenge my comrade and bring my lord back to life, shouted the fanatic. Tell me immediately where you took him. The girl was enraged. You will never find him. Your dear boy will never return from here. He will die in agony, in solitude. The Paguyerian began to laugh. You can't do that. True prophecy cannot be broken, replied a voice in the shadows. Oh really? The man snorted. When he said this, the girl stuck her head out of the darkness, and the light of candles illuminated her face. Her slightly ginger, short hair was tangled like hay, and her fringed covered her blue eyes. Do you doubt? Julia asked after a long time. She grabbed her saber, and as she did it, the door opposite him was suddenly raised to the ground like a curtain. Nanthornin stepped in with all his friends. The Paguyerian was enraged at this sight and grabbed the golden staff, but Max threw his spear at him. The man avoided the blow, but he did not notice that an enraged boy was running towards him. Peter knocked down the Black Knight with his bulk, and Bago grabbed a hammer and began to smash the monument, which fell to the ground after a while. The purple robe fell to the ground and flew out of the window, swept away by the wind. No, shouted furiously Paguyerian soldier. He threw himself at the lying Peter and grabbed him by the collar to pick him up. Touch my lord again, and I'll jugulate that fat rag boy's throat, he roared, putting his dagger to the boy's neck. Julia approached him. Not a step further, the Paguyerian pulled out his golden staff in front of him and pointed its tip at the girl. You are well aware that magic does not work on me, she whispered. But on him it works. If you will take one step closer, I will burn the bowels of your dear friend." Julia gave him only an angry look. "Well, it so happens that the piggy boy was caught us first. You spoiled my plans a bit, but that's okay. I had already sent the Asletian fleet towards the Moliarian coast. Now you have to hurry, either he or the city. Choose quickly." "I have no intention of choosing anyone, you devilish subject. You won't deprive me of another friend. I will not allow you to kill my loved ones," shouted the girl. "Oh, how sweet. I know very well that Brut was extremely close to you, so let me destroy another of your companions so that you can shed your pretty tears again." As soon as he said this, Nanthorin threw his silver blade at the golden-haired man. To everyone's horror, the Pagungerian decided to cover himself with the boy, but the sword somehow mysteriously bypassed the obstacle and stabbed the Black Knight into the shoulder pad. Peter broke free from the hands of the executioner, and Julia pulled out a gun and pointed it at the head of the thrashing fanatic, but the Black Knight managed to snatch the weapon from his shoulder and deflect the bullet with his magic cane. The girl, not wanting to lose her valuable ammunition, reached for her crossbow, but she did not have time to send a bolt, when suddenly more Pagungerians ran inside the room. The team was surrounded after a while from all sides, and the heavily armed guards pulled their halberds in front of them. "Did you really think that I sent all my soldiers to Molia? You know I can't leave, until my lord will not be resurrected. Nothing will stop me. Your Davy will not prevent me from doing anything anymore. Now his blood will revive my lord and our prophecy will be fulfilled. Ice and fire will consume the south, and Merentican will place his throne at the gate of the three worlds." The Pagungerian leader began to shout. After these words, he struck the ground with the tip of his staff, and lightning spread throughout the room. "The rest of your wretched friends are about to die. Netin, Jolifessa, Merlin, Alet, Andron, Metans and my brother and everyone else will never see you again. Anyway, all of you also will die." Saying this, he raised his hands towards the sky. A gusty wind penetrated through the open windows. The night sky was covered with thick clouds covering the stars, and in an instant it thundered from a thunderstorm. "Thus saith our Lord, the day of our glory is coming. The era of humans, elves and dwarfs is coming to an end. Every unclean creature will perish in fire and ice, and a new era of our ancestors will come, great mighty powers who will rule this world." Suddenly, the whole island on which the fortress rested trembled, and all of them except the sorcerer were knocked off their feet. One of the lightning bolts penetrated through the window and hit him without doing him any harm. "Get out of here, swim away to the next shore and I will save David," began to cry out Nanthorin. "But we can't leave you here, we have to." Celian did not finish his speech, because the guards decided to prevent them to escape. "I can handle it myself, the Pagungerians will soon get there. Alan is waiting for you in the ship," the warrior replied, killing the first two opponents. The others made their way out in the same way, and the golden-haired Pagungerian did not pay even the slightest attention to the escapees. Pupin, Bago and Cordrin were the first to move, and after them Celian along with Max and Peter. They all knew that Esther, Thomas, Matthew, Isabel, Laura, and all the other companions in the city of Havron were in danger. Probably Netin, Metans, Tirefadin, Stendrim and their princess prepare the city for the inevitable. No walls will stop the Pagungerian power from destroying Molia, and when Molia will be conquered, Ethanestia will have no chance. Meanwhile, the Black Knight still admired the view outside the window and smiled at the sight of the red glow far on the sea horizon. The moon and the stars had been darkened over the entire south, and although no land could be seen from so far away, it was easy to guess that everything of this was beginning. When Malchidiel defeated all the soldiers, only he remained in the room, along with Julia and the Pagungerian leader. "Julia, join the others, the crew is waiting for you in the strait," cried the giant. "I'm not going anywhere, I want to kill this madman," the warrior replied, pointing her saber at the man staring at the landscape. "Nope, you are needed there, they need you." "I'm also needed by David," the girl still insisted. "You can't expose yourself, Julia, you know how it's going to end," shouted the light-eyed man. "I know perfectly well how it will end, but you are my friend, not my father. Find David quickly, and I'll take care of this degenerate for the time." Hearing this, the warrior had no choice. He turned and rushed quickly to the upper floors, disappearing behind the door. "Well, so my assumptions were confirmed. So you really want to fight me?" the Pagungerian finally said, taking his eyes away from the show behind the window. He looked to the girl, face and snorted. Apparently you think that you are a heroine, right? There are no heroes in my world, there are only the weak to draw strength from their faith, or the mighty ones who have chosen to turn away from the kingdom of darkness, drawing strength from their weaknesses, said the 17-year-old girl. So you are that first example. It's just a pity that you no longer have something to believe, little bunny. Nope, I'm that second one, you monster, and you're about to find out what my weakness is, Julia hissed. Really? So what is your weakness? Asked Hypagurian. My anger. The girl replied to him, tightening and clenching her fist. Her eyes shone with a golden glow, and her opponent, who saw it, froze in amazement and fear. The words of prophecy cannot be broken. You will be defeated sooner or later, she shouted, throwing herself in a run towards him. The man stretched out his staff in front of him, but the descendant of the Titans deflected the blow with her own power. A luminous glow spread throughout the room, and its way threw them back. Julia hit the rear column, and the other one flew out of the window of the huge tower. However, the girl rose from the ground and jumped right behind him. As she fell, she saw that the enemy was holding a purple covering in his hands. Surprisingly, she was not surprised by this fact and tried to gain speed to catch up the falling opponent. After a while she managed to grab his long hair, but there was no time to get closer, because the ground was already so close. The Pagurian covered himself with a purple robe when he was only 2 meters from the ground, and when his back was already touching the tall grass, he blurred completely without a trace. Julia, despite this, managed to pull out her own covering, which David had once given her. She hit the ground, but a white light shielded her from falling. She rolled over on her back, taking air into her lungs, and looked at the stars. I will never let go, you know that very well, she mumbled towards one of them. A purple, flickering light appeared in the sky for a moment, and then blurred into night and black sky.